Hello, fellow trumpeters and musicians. My name is Josh Rzepka, and welcome to another Mute Monday. Today, I am thrilled to be bringing to you one of my very favorite vintage mutes, the legendary Ray Robinson cup mute. This mute right here is the cup mute that so many people are looking for. And this particular one that I'm holding right now is actually from the 1930s, and I had it restored by none other than the mute meister himself, Roger Ingram. And I'm going to be demonstrating this as well as a couple other Ray Robinsons that I've got. So I have from different eras as well as the new mute that is made by Warburton Music. So I'm going to be comparing old and new today, so that's going to be a lot of fun. It would not be an exaggeration for me to say that this video was years in the making. And that's because I spent years scouring the internet, going through eBay, going through different forums, really looking all over Facebook to try and find one of these in great condition. And that is easier said than done. Most of the time when you find one of these Ray Robinson mutes, well, kind of looks like this. It's busted, and it's been sitting in someone's case for decades, and it's been neglected, and it's in pretty bad shape. So the only options you have are to have someone take that mute and restore it, or possibly restore it yourself. Well, now there is another option, and that is the brand new Warburton Mute Meister line. And this mute is the Ingram Mute Meister Cup Mute by Warburton Music. And I'm going to get into this as well to see how it stacks up. So I'm going to play all of them back to back so you can hear the difference between them. Well, I won't be playing all 6 of my vintage mutes because some of them are pretty busted. But all the ones that I have that are in good enough condition to play, I will play so you can hear how they sound. A couple little bits of history. The Ray Robinson mutes, these were made, the ones that I have were made in the 1930s. And I had 2 of them restored by Roger. And he was actually really confident. He said, you know what? I've taken a lot of these apart and I fixed them up and I know all the different eras, and really confident that yours were made between 1930 and 1935. And then he said, in fact, I think they were made in the same month, which blew my mind. It's just incredible. And the way he was able to tell is because Roger's restored so many mutes, he's taken them apart, and he knows, based on the construction, based on the materials, based on what type of paint, what type of glue, how much they used, he can tell like when it was made and what batches they were made in. It's really unbelievable. But Roger was able to share some information, and I want to share that with you because it's really cool info. So, Ray Robinson, the very first Ray Robinson cup mutes, they're made by Guy Humes, and they didn't have this iconic black and white look that we're all so familiar with now. The first ones were like a little reddish, and I don't have one to show you because they're extremely rare. It said Ray Robinson mute made by Guy Humes, and if that sounds familiar, Guy Humes is the Humes in Humes and Berg. Now, the original Ray Robinson cup mutes, the oldest ones, they had little tabs on the cups. I don't know if you've seen that before. I don't have one of those either. They're very rare. So one of the things that makes the Ray Robinson cup really unique is that the interior of this mute, the inside, has got a felt lining. And here's the label for you. It's got a felt lining, and it's smooth at the top. The top of the cup is smooth. It doesn't have little scalloped edges on it, which is different, of course, from the stone line cup mute that we're also familiar with. If you'll notice on this mute, I'm going to show you now 2 different eras of this mute. All right, this is 1930s, and this one here is a much later one. I'm not sure exactly the date, but maybe it's in the 60s. Check that out. You see those rivets? You go around. On one side, there are rivets. Well, the old original mute, no rivets on it at all. The construction changed. Also, the inside of this cup, look at that. You see how some of the felt has fallen off? Well, that's not actually really even felt. The later years, they stopped using felt and they started using a spray-on material that if you touch it, it'll start to disintegrate and fall off after all these years. They changed design, they changed materials over the years, and that actually impacted the way the mute played. In all likelihood, it's because this mute was very popular and they were needing to manufacture a lot of them. And they needed to streamline their manufacturing process to, be less expensive and less time-consuming. So as we get into the later mutes, they don't really sound the same as the earliest ones. If you're trying to find one of these classic Ray Robinson cup mutes, you're going to want to pay attention that you find one that doesn't have the rivets on the side in good condition. You don't want it to be, look at this one here, all right? This doesn't have rivets. However, someone cut the top of it off. That's not very good, right? But this is interesting. This is interesting. The paint on the bottom of this is starting to come off. And you can see underneath, on the very bottom of the mute, one of the things that makes this mute interesting is that there is a wooden resonator at the bottom. Different from the stone-lined, right? The Humsenberg stone-lined mutes. That stone-lined is actually, they put a little thin layer of concrete on the bottom. That's the stone, it's stone-lined. And if you have one of the early ones, you can, if it peels off, you open it up, you can see inside there. And this has a wooden resonator on the bottom. And the new version of this mute, if you flip it on the bottom, you see that it has that wooden resonator on the bottom. And that's part of what gives this mute its sound. It's not just the shape, it's not just the dimensions of the cup, it's not just the felt, it's the wooden resonator as well. It's everything put together. And I think, as far as vintage cup mutes go, this and the Shastok, of course, are the ones that people are always looking for. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play the two mutes which Roger restored for me. These are both 1930s Ray Robinson cup mutes. This one here is filed, the corks are filed real tight, so it goes into my bell a little further. This one is filed not as tight, so it's a little more open sounding. Now, I will compare those first then to this new Warburton Music one, and then I'll move on from these and I will add in this later year Ray Robinson cup that is in pretty good condition. It's not as perfect condition as these three, but it's in good playable condition and it's sealed. And what I mean by sealed is if you blow air into the top there's no leaks anywhere. There's no cracks where the glue has come up or anything, because that's going to affect the way that it plays and it resonates. This will give you a great idea of how the Ray Robinson mute sounds from the original versus close to when they stopped making them and they had changed the materials and they had changed the design a little bit. And then this brand new Warburton one. So here we go. First up, I'm going to just play a sustained pitch. So I'm going to cut in between all four of them so you can hear how the sound changes. And then I'm going to play some different exercises and you're going to be able to hear the exact same thing over and over between all four of them, and that should give you a really good sense of how this mute sounds and responds. Now I'm going to play some arpeggios so you can hear the sound throughout all of the different registers. right, now I'm going to play some chromatic scales going down and then up so you can hear the evenness and the sound throughout the different registers, slurred. All right, so you've just heard 4 mutes now, going from old to new, and then not quite as old, but still old. And these original 1930s Ray Robinsons, you can hear how the sound on them is different from the cork being filed really tight and then it being a little more open. And it's not a bad idea to have 2 cup mutes, whatever type of cup mute you use. It's not a bad idea to have 2 of them identical and then file the corks real tight on one and then not as tight on the other. That way you can get that real great tight cup sound when you're doing solo work or if you're recording. But then if you have to play in a section, you need to project a little bit more, you can take out that other cup mute which isn't quite as tight. And that's going to project a little bit more. You're going to get a little bit more edge on your articulation, and you're still going to get a great, great sound. Now, you then heard that compared with this brand new Ingram Mute Meister Cup Mute by Warburton Music. This is the version of the mute that you can buy now, today, and it sounds great. I think you can tell and hear that Roger really took all of the expertise and knowledge that he has from taking these Ray Robinson mutes apart and putting them back together. He's got the knowledge and expertise to recreate it in a modern version, and I think it sounds great. The later version mute that I have that has the fake felt on the inside and it's got the rivets in the cup, this one is also filed pretty tight on, so it goes into my bell pretty far. Very, very similar to the very first mute that I played. And what I mean by that is when I say tight and far, I'm gonna show you right now actually. So the 1930s mute that I have, it's filed in pretty tight. This is the proper distance to have the mute from the bell. Do you see that? All right, here we go. You can see it's just a little gap. It's not very much, just a little bit of space, and that's the distance that the mute was designed to be played at. And in fact, when you really file the corks and you put it in at that distance, it plays more in tune. And it says on the side of the mute, actually, always, file corks if necessary. And it's necessary. Always in tune. Well, these mutes are pretty in tune, but I did notice that as I was getting into the upper register, some of them were playing a little bit flat. I had to kind of raise it up a little bit. And into the lower register, some of them were a little bit sharp. I did notice that the mutes that I had filed the corks tightest on played the most in tune throughout the registers. The tuning was the most stable from low to high, and I didn't have to do as much adjustments. To me, my ears, when I'm playing on the most recent Ray Robinson, this is not restored, it's a later year, it just doesn't have the same clarity of tone. When I really examine the materials, I can tell that they've changed the materials that they used. Even if I show you between one that's not quite as old, so this busted one here, if you look closely at the materials, you'll see there's a little texture. There's a little bit of texture to it. And then even on the bottom, there's a little bit of texture. Versus this one's in real rough shape. It's got the rivets, but it doesn't have that texture to it, and the bottom's all messed up on this one. So they obviously changed materials a number of times throughout the years. And because of that, you can get Ray Robinson mutes that sound totally different from each other, especially depending on the condition that they're in. Hopefully this was interesting. Hopefully you got something out of this. I love this mute. I am very happy to have a couple of them in my collection that are in great shape. And I think if you're looking for one and you're having difficulty finding one, you may want to consider looking into the Warburton Music one, because it feels very, very similar playing to my restored Ray Robinson. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and clicking that like button or sharing it with all of your friends. Next week's video is going to be a zinger. And what I mean by that is we're going to be playing the Zinger mute from Trumpet Gear. These are some great Harman mute alternatives, and if you aren't familiar with them, then next week you are going to learn and find out all about them. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you then.